Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the damp boots of a medieval assassin. Not the cool, mysterious kind with the hood and the theme music, but the real version. Imagine you're hunched in a smoke-filled tavern, the air so thick with sweat, beer and bad decisions that you feel like you're breathing soup. You're not here for a drink, you're here for a job. And that job, well, it's probably going to get you killed. Some guy with questionable teeth and a knife that's seen better centuries leans over, mumbling something about silencing a problem. You nod like you've done this before, though your only previous experience is gutting fish. You accept a crumpled pouch of coins, half of which turn out to be buttons, pebbles, and one suspiciously chewed plum pit. Welcome to the industry. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and what time it is where you're listening. I love seeing where these sleepy adventures end up. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You slink out of the tavern under a moon, smeared like butter over an oily sky. There's no formal training, no secret lair, no cool mentor with a scar and a grudge. Just you, a rusty blade, and a vague description of the target. Fat merchant, smells like lavender and lies. Not exactly helpful. Still, you try to think like a professional. What would a real assassin do? Blend in, stay alert, avoid eye contact with the town's only guard, who is inconveniently also the local blacksmith and part-time baker. You slink into the shadows of crooked alleys that smell like damp straw and something recently deceased. A rat makes eye contact. You blink first. Eventually, you make it to the merchant's street, only to realize all the houses are made of the same timber and wattle, and apparently everyone here smells like lavender. You loiter, you squint, you nearly trip over a chamber pot someone kindly emptied right outside the door. That's when it hits you. This isn't glamorous. It's not mysterious. It's just sticky, smelly, and confusing. You finally pick a door and knock, smooth, real stealthy. A child answers and screams. You run back at your lodgings, a hay pile behind the butcher's. You reflect on your career choice. Why did you say yes? Oh, right, because it was either this or work on the tannery floor scraping animal hides until your fingers fall off. Assassination seemed like the more exciting option, the one where you get to travel, meet interesting people, and stab them. But now your boots are soaked through with something that might be ale, might be urine, and your dagger has snapped at the hilt because you used it to open a sausage. There's no turning back, though. In this world, once you take the coin, backing out is frowned upon. And by frowned upon, we mean punishable by being thrown down a well full of eel bones. You fall asleep to the lullaby of bar fights and arguing cats, knowing tomorrow you'll have to try again. Historians still argue whether any formal assassins' guilds existed in Western Europe, or if most killers for hire were just desperate, opportunistic loners like you. What we do know is that life for low-level contract killers was not high-paying or glamorous. The most infamous were the Hashashin of the Middle East, but their mystique rarely translated into real power or job. Security as you chew on a stolen crust of bread the next morning, you wonder, what exactly does one wear to an assassination? There's no handbook, no beginner's guide to blending in. You wrap yourself in an old wool cloak that smells like sadness and wet dog, hoping it looks vaguely mysterious. The mirror confirms you look more like a wandering beggar than a deadly blade in the night. Your client hasn't shown up again. No confirmation, no great job. Here's a bonus. You suspect you've been stiffed or set up, or both. That's when someone slips a note under the corner of your cloak. It says simply, "You failed, try again, or don't wake up." Charming. You try again. This time you decide on stealth. Real stealth. No knocking, no screaming children. You climb a fence, roll into a pig pen, and wait until nightfall. The pigs like you. One starts chewing your bootlace affectionately. It's the best company you've had in weeks. When it's finally dark, you sneak toward the merchant's window. Inside, a pudgy man is eating goose liver and singing off-key. Lavender, check. You draw your dagger. The replacement is actually a fish knife, but it's pointy enough, and prepare to slip through the window. Then the shutters slam open. The merchant screams, throws a chamber pot at your face, and whacks you with a stale loaf of bread. You run. Again. The pigs cheer. You collapse later under a bridge, wet, bruised, humiliated, and technically not even paid. The bridge trolls, really just drunk fishermen, offer you fermented turnip mash and advice you didn't ask for. They tell you this line of work isn't for everyone. That's fair. You curl into your cloak, staring up at the moon again, and wonder if there's a guild or union or at least a pamphlet, something to help you not get bread beaten on your next attempt. But no, you're on your own. A one-man catastrophe with a dull knife and high hopes. Still, you made it through the first job attempt. Mostly, you learned something, even if that something is don't knock before committing crimes. You've got dirt in your ears, a chipped tooth, and a new hatred for chamber pots. But maybe, just maybe, you'll be better next time. You wake up stiff, soaked, and smelling faintly of pig. Again, but this time, you've got a lead. Your original target has a cousin who works in the merchant quarter, and just so happens to owe someone a dangerous favor. Through the web of half-whispers and shared bread crusts, you hear, he'll be at the livestock market at dawn. Good. This time, you'll make it count. Problem is, the livestock market is loud and chaotic and very, very smelly. You blend in among the straw-covered mud and bleating animals, eyeing your mark, a squat man in a fur-lined tunic who smells like sheep and arrogance. He's surrounded by traders yelling over one another, bartering, oxen, chickens, and what you're pretty sure is a stuffed rabbit being passed off as magical. There's no clear shot, no shadowy alley, just you, your fish knife, and 5 goats between you and your career milestone. You try to follow him discreetly, but the mud is treacherous and the goats hostile. One headbutts you in the knee. Another chews your sleeve. You're not stealthy, you're a walking comedy show. Still, you tail him as he waddles past hay carts and insult-hurling fishmongers, finally slipping into a narrow alley. Perfect. This is it. You take a deep breath, ready your knife, and then you step directly into a fresh pile of cow dung. Loudly, the squelch echoes like a church bell. Your target turns. You both freeze. Then he screams thief and throws a cabbage at you. A cabbage. It hits your shoulder with surprising force. People come running. You run faster. You dodge through a crowd, slide under a donkey cart, and barrel through a fabric stall, emerging wrapped in 3 yards of linen and a very judgmental scarf. You duck into an abandoned mill, heart racing. You failed. Again. But you're alive. Back at the butcher's hay pile, you reflect. Assassination, as it turns out, is less about precise, silent kills and more about livestock-related humiliation. You peel off your ruined cloak and try to scrub the cabbage smell out of your skin. It doesn't work. Historians still argue whether assassins were common fixtures in medieval cities or more like rare tools of powerful nobles. While courts occasionally used discreet solutions, most so-called assassins were thugs with a flexible moral compass and a sharp stick. There wasn't much professionalism involved, no creeds, no oaths, just desperation and sharp elbows. You start to think the real danger of this job isn't getting caught. It's the slow erosion of your dignity. You spend the next few days observing, watching, learning. The sheep-scented merchant is clearly paranoid now, checking over his shoulder constantly and keeping 2 guards nearby, one of whom naps more than he watches. That could be your opening, but then a different opportunity presents itself. You're loitering near the fishmonger's stall, pretending to be intensely interested in a suspiciously dry mackerel when a brawl erupts across the square. Turns out, someone was caught watering down their mead. Scandalous. As fists fly and barrels topple, you spot your target hurrying down a side path, flanked only by the sleepy guard. This is your moment. You follow, light-footed despite your muddy boots, and a splitting headache from earlier fermented turnip experiments. The alley they turn into is quiet, shaded, and lined with cracked stone walls and broken carts. You duck behind one and wait as they pass. You spring forward clumsy but committed. You shove the sleepy guard against the wall, raising your knife toward the merchant, and freeze, because the merchant is crying, not just a little weepy fool, wet sobs. He falls to his knees and begs you not to kill him, offering you a sack of beans and an old family ring in exchange for mercy. You hesitate. It's hard to feel menacing when your victim is snotting on your boots. Then, just as suddenly, he stops crying, whips a knife from under his tunic, and lunges. You fall backward in surprise, narrowly dodging the slash, and roll into a pile of discarded apples, slippery apples. You try to get up, but your foot slides and you crash into a water barrel. The guard, now awake and furious, lumbers toward you with a club the size of your torso. You bolt. Later, nursing a cracked rib and apple-scented bruises, you stare at the night sky and sigh. You didn't sign up for this emotional whiplash. 1 minute you're delivering vengeance, the next you're nearly shanked by a sobbing bean baron. You start to wonder what the job actually is. Is it stabbing people quietly in the dark? Or is it just surviving their weird reactions? There's a fringe theory that many medieval hits were actually botched robberies later rewritten in dramatic ballads. After all, a bungled theft sounds a lot cooler if you frame it as the silent blade of vengeance in the moonlight. You decide you need to rethink your approach. Less brute force, more subtlety. Maybe it's time to invest in a disguise, maybe even practice. You try stabbing hay bales for precision. They win. You practice hiding in barrels. One is full of pickled turnips, and you nearly suffocate. You test your reflexes by sneaking up on a street dog. It bites your ankle. Progress is slow. You finally try one more time approaching the merchant's residence at night, slipping through a garden, narrowly avoiding a rake to the face. You creep up to the window, heart-pounding dot inside. Your target snores loudly, half covered by a fur blanket and a crumpled ledger of debts. You raise your knife and pause. Something about this feels wrong. Maybe it's the way his guard now sleeps sitting upright with a crossbow pointed at the door. Maybe it's just the exhaustion. You don't finish the job. Instead, you steal a loaf of bread and leave. Because tonight, survival feels like enough. You decide cloaks are overrated. Sure, they look mysterious flapping behind brooding figures in paintings, but in reality, they're heavy, itchy, and constantly wet. They smell like boiled cabbage and regret. Yours is especially cursed it catches. On every door latch, swishes like a banner in the breeze, and makes stealth about as possible as tiptoeing in chainmail. You try going without it one evening. Big mistake. The cold wraps around you like a vengeful ghost, and you spend the night shivering behind a fish stall, gnawing on dried eel and wondering what sins led you here. The next day, you barter your cloak for a second-hand hooded tunic. It's supposed to help you blend in. Instead, you resemble a very suspicious librarian with lice. You make a mental note. Medieval fashion is not built for sneaking, or comfort, or movement. Honestly, it's built mostly for chafing dot. To be fair, you're not the only one suffering for style. Across the market, a scribe in full woolen robes faints dramatically into a sack of turnips, overheated from simply existing. His sandals fly off. A chicken steals one. You laugh quietly, then get pecked by the chicken. Historians still argue whether assassins had specialized uniforms or insignias. Some say they wore certain rings or embroidered tokens to identify themselves to clients. Others argue they wore whatever helped them vanish into crowds, meaning mostly peasant garb, hooded cloaks, or the occasional monk's robe swiped off. A washing line. You try that last one. You sneak into the abbey's laundry yard under cover of twilight, aiming for a robe flapping on a wooden rack. The problem is, monks don't wash alone. A novice spots you mid-grab, and you panic leaping over a basket of soapy linens and sprinting through the cloisters wearing only one sleeve of the robe and a potato sack for decency. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings and a goose honks disapprovingly. Your dignity? Long gone. Later, you find yourself at the local alehouse, nursing a watered-down drink and a badly bruised ego. A bard nearby sings about a legendary assassin cloaked in shadows, able to melt into stone and whisper death with a flick of his blade. You, meanwhile, trip over your own bootlaces and get caught trying to climb a fence by a dog named Balthazar, who now thinks you're a chew toy. You start to wonder, was anyone ever good at this? There are fringe theories about traveling knife dancers, performers, who doubled as covert killers. Their shows would draw crowds, providing cover for quick eliminations. But you once dropped your knife mid-spin and stabbed your own toe. Still, your work continues. Another name, another target. A local tax collector who's gotten greedy and careless. You figure this one might be easier. Everyone already hates him. You stake out his route for days. He travels light with only one guard and a coin pouch you can hear clinking from the next village. One evening you make your move. You're crouched behind a crate, waiting. You time your breathing. You grip your knife. You leap Dot and immediately get tangled in your own tunic. You don't leap so much as tumble like a sack of oats with ambition. The guard turns. The collector yelps. You roll, kick up dust, and somehow headbutt the guard in the gut. By accident, Dot, it works. You snatch the coin pouch and flee before you even realize what happened. Dot, it's not exactly the stuff of legends, but hey, a win is a win. You celebrate that. Night with warm bread, a stolen apple, and a full bath for the first time in weeks. It's cold, it's shallow, but it's yours. You tell yourself, next time you'll be smoother. You'll move like shadow, like wind, like legend. Dot, you test this by trying to jump from one rooftop to another. Dot, bad idea. The tiles beneath your feet crumble. You flail and you crash through a thatched roof into a very surprised family's dinner. The mother screams. The father throws a ladle. The child offers you a beetroot. You limp out with a twisted ankle and a mouthful of straw. One of the goats follows you for 3 blocks. Turns out rooftop running is mostly fantasy. Real medieval rooftops weren't built for parkour. They were built to keep rain off your porridge and collapse under snow. Even the nimblest thief wouldn't risk them unless the street below was full of guards or angry X's with pitchforks. You write that one off as a lesson, Dot, so you adapt. Lower your expectations. Accept the absurdity. You ditch the heavy cloak for a patched jerkin. You carry a backup dagger now, just in case your first one gets stuck in a loaf of stale bread again. You keep a goose feather in your belt, not for flair, but because you accidentally sat on it once, and now it's a weird good luck charm. Your next job comes via coded message carved into a piece of bark. Very dramatic, very unnecessary. The bark says, midnight, under the mill bridge. Be seen and you're dead. Classic. You show up wearing your least conspicuous clothing, dark, loose, slightly damp. You slip into place beneath the bridge, keeping to the shadows your knife. Resting against your thigh, the client arrives. Hooded, silent, smudged with ash. Dot, you nod in greeting. They say nothing. You nod again, because apparently you're bad at silence. Still nothing. Finally, they hand over a tiny scroll and vanish. You squint at it in the dim light. The parchment reads, Target, local fish inspector. Carries an abacus. Hates shellfish. You know what to do. You do not, in fact, know what to do, but you'll figure it out, eventually. You sit with the scroll in hand, staring at the words like they'll rearrange themselves into something more helpful. Target, local fish inspector. Carries an abacus. Hates shellfish. That's it. No location. No schedule. Not even a drawing. You begin your hunt at the docks, the most obvious place to find a man who inspects fish for a living. The smell hits first brine, guts, rotting scales. You wrinkle your nose, already regretting this line of work. A seagull screams overhead like it knows your secrets. The docks are chaos. Fishmongers yell prices, sailors unload barrels, and children chase crabs with twine nets. Somewhere in this mess is your man. You ask around subtly, seen a guy with an abacus? It's not the stealthiest question, but it's all you've got. Someone points you toward a hunched figure arguing with the vendor about the freshness of his trout. He's waving a wooden abacus like it's a sword, clacking beads furiously while accusing a fisherman of mollusk tampering. The fish inspector. No doubt, you trail him for the day, learning his routine. He inspects, argues, clacks, moves on. His pockets jingle. Not coins too light. Keys, maybe. Or marbles. You make a note to find out. You also notice he takes a break every afternoon at a side stall that sells boiled eels and barley beer. He sits alone, always with his back to the wall. A perfect opening. You consider your options. Daggers are loud. So is shoving a man into a barrel. You think poison. Yes. Clean, quiet, untraceable. And medieval assassins surely used it all the time, right? You begin the hunt for poison dot. It does not go well. Turns out poison isn't exactly sitting on shelves with labels, like Target Bane. One drop does it. You visit an herbalist with suspiciously good teeth, who offers you a paste made from foxglove, mushrooms, and something called witch's nail. You're not sure if that last one is a plant or a metaphor. The paste costs 3 silver coins. You have 1 copper button, half a dried pear, and a promise to owe big. The herbalist laughs. Loudly, you return later and try to steal some. The door creaks. A cat screams. A pot explodes. You end up with 2 splinters and a jar of what might be laxative. You'll take it. You decide to test your concoction on a rat. You leave a crumb dipped in paste near your sleeping spot. The rat sniffs it and walks away in disgust. You sniff it and feel dizzy. You don't even eat it, just smell it. That's not ideal. Still, time's ticking. The next day, you follow the inspector again, now with your poison wrapped in a bit of bread crust. When he sits down at his stall, you approach, acting like a poor traveler with nothing to lose. You offer him the bread with wide eyes and a shaky voice. He stares. You smile. He takes the bread, sniffs it, then hands it back. I don't like barley, he says. Before dumping it on the ground, you cry a little inside, so much for poison. Historians still argue whether poison was common among lower-tier assassins. The wealthy had access to rare toxins and trained apothecaries, but common killers like you probably relied more on knives and bad luck. Poison was too expensive, too unreliable, and sometimes too obvious, like when it turned the victim's mouth green and caused loud, dramatic vomiting. That evening you sit by the water and consider your options. The inspector walks the same route every day. There's a narrow alley he passes where the fishmongers dump unsold eels. It's slippery, dark, and smells like failure. You decide, tonight. You crouch in the alley, heart thudding, knife ready. You hear him approach slow, deliberate steps, the faint clack of his abacus. He hums tunelessly. You count the seconds, 3, 2, 1. You step out and immediately slip on eel guts. You crash into a barrel, knocking it over with a splash. The inspector jumps, drops his abacus, and screams like a goat being startled mid-nap. He bolts. You chase, limping, half-covered in fish oil and embarrassment. He throws a basket of shrimp at you. A cat joins the pursuit. Somewhere, a vendor yells, "Get him!" Though you're not sure who him is anymore, you lose him. But not before he drops his coin pouch. Inside, 3 coppers, a dry sardine, and a tiny vial of something that smells very poisonous. You pocket it. Silver lining. You spend the night hiding in a crate. It's cramped and smells like pickled herring, but it's safe. You dream of abacuses attacking you and wake up with a stiff neck and one very angry crab sitting on your knee. The next day, the inspector is gone. Word is he fled. Town claimed someone tried to poison him. You did your job, technically, and you're pretty sure no one's coming after you with a rope and torch, so that's a plus. Still, it doesn't feel like a win. You weren't silent. You weren't efficient. You weren't even successful in the traditional sense. But he's gone. That's something. Maybe poison is for rich people. Maybe stealth is for storybooks. You have fish guts in your boots and a mild rash from eel slime, but you're still here. By now, you've accepted that your career as a medieval assassin is less graceful predator and more very confused burglar with a knife. But you're not giving up. No, you've decided to upgrade your escape game. After all, what separates a good assassin from a dead assassin is the ability to disappear quietly, swiftly, elegantly, like a whisper on the wind. You have never been a whisper on anything, but you're learning. You spend the day watching a pickpocket at the market, young, nimble, far too smug. She slips between carts and crowds like water, vanishing the moment someone shouts. You try to copy her movements, darting behind a row of baskets and nearly tripping into a vat of cider. So maybe you're more like a gentle thud on the wind. You need an escape plan. You need rooftops. The bards sing about assassins leaping from beam to beam, soaring over city walls, racing across red-tiled rooftops like ghosts in leather boots. You want that. You deserve that. You climb your first building using a rotting fence, a suspiciously wobbly barrel, and blind optimism. At the top, panting, you discover several things. Medieval rooftops are not flat. Medieval rooftops are not sturdy. Medieval rooftops are tilted death slides covered in moss, soot, and pigeon poop. You take a step. The tile shifts under your foot with a groan. Then another. You flail, grab a chimney for support, and dislodge half of it. Bricks rain down like judgment. Below, someone curses loudly. A goat bleats. You freeze, then slowly slide down the roof on your back, landing in a pile of compost and broken pride. You smell like onions for the next 2 days. Historians still argue how much movement assassins truly did above ground level. The popular idea of rooftop runners is more romantic than realistic. Most medieval buildings weren't strong enough to support adult weight, especially in poorer districts. A few trained couriers may have used wall beams or upper ledges, but even they likely had more bruises than successful escapes. You give the rooftops a rest. Instead, you scout the alleys. Twisting paths, hidden doors, underground wine cellars that smell like moldy grapes and regret. These become your hunting grounds. You map routes in your head, memorize loose cobblestones, note which doors creak and which ones are left unlocked when the baker forgets his keys, which is often. One afternoon, you're following a new target, a courier rumored to be passing. Sensitive letters to a rival noble. He's fast, paranoid, carries a knife in each boot and one under his hat, because why not? You track him through the tannery quarter. The smell alone is enough to qualify as a war crime. Hides stretch across racks like sunburnt ghosts, and the ground squelches beneath your feet in a way that's unsettling. You nearly step on what might have been a cat Dot as he turns a corner. You pounce. You grab his cloak, yank him backward only to realize you've grabbed the wrong man. This one screams in a high-pitched voice and slaps you with a bundle of parchment. His actual job? Singing telegrams. You mumble an apology and run. You escape into a stable, panting and mortified, where a horse looks at you with silent judgment. You hide in the hayloft and wait out the search. That's when you get an idea. Horses. Not for riding. You've tried that and nearly fell into a well, but for cover. If you can time your escape routes with the stable hands leading the horses out. At dawn and dusk, you can slip between them. Use the noise. Use the movement. Be the chaos. Your next mission is in the merchant quarter again. A nobleman's nephew, slimy, cruel, always surrounded by hired thugs unless he's at the bathhouse. That's your window. You time everything. Dusk. You sneak into the outer courtyard of the bathhouse, dodging a washerwoman who nearly clocks you with a wooden spoon. You slip through a curtain, creep down a hallway, and press yourself against the cool stone wall. Steam curls around you. Voices echo. You move and immediately step on a dropped bar of soap. Your legs fly out from under you, and you crash into a shelf of drying herbs. The scent of lavender explodes into the air. You try to recover, but someone screams, "Witch!" You run. Again. This time, your plan works. You dart out just as the stable hands lead a row of horses across the yard. You merge with them, crouching low, using the wagon's shadow as cover. A guard yells, but the horses spook and bolt. Amid the chaos, you vanish into a flower cart. Not graceful, but effective. Historians note that urban assassins often used predictable city rhythms, market hours, church bells, guard rotations to move unseen. Escaping into crowds was more realistic than vanishing into thin air. You're starting to understand that. You're not supernatural. You're practical, slippery, lucky. You make it back to your haystack headquarters and finally exhale. No injuries, no angry mobs, just flour in your ears and the faint scent of lavender still clinging to your tunic. Later that night, you find a note tucked under a rock where you sleep. It reads, "Job acknowledged, payment pending, don't guy." You smile. For the first time in days, you've learned to walk quieter, plan smarter, and most importantly, not attempt roof acrobatics after eating turnip stew. You're getting better. Sort of. But no matter how clever your escape or how sneaky your disguise, you still need tools. And right now, your arsenal consists of one dull fish knife, a twig you keep pulling a backup dagger, and a half-empty vial of mystery liquid that might be poison or vinegar. You need gear. You head to the outskirts of the city, where blacksmiths and armorers run their smoky shops far from the respectable inns and candle makers. Your contact tells you of a man, Jarek, who forges weapons for private clients. He's got a crooked eye, 2 missing fingers, and a forge that smells like dragon breath and burnt socks. You approach cautiously. Jarek eyes you up and down. "You don't look like an assassin," he says. "Perfect," you reply. He laughs and waves you into the forge. Inside, rows of blades glint in the firelight, most of them shaped like they were forged during an earthquake. You pick up A dagger, it's bent. Another too heavy. A third has a notch that looks suspiciously like a bite mark. You settle on a plain, narrow blade with a wooden grip and a tiny groove down the spine. What's the groove for? You ask. Poison, says Jarek, or gravy, he adds after. A beat. Depends how optimistic you are. You pay with a chunk of silver you definitely didn't steal. Jarek throws in a leather sheath and a sarcastic warning. Don't stab yourself. That's bad for repeat business. Feeling bolder, you test the blade on a pumpkin behind the forge. It slices clean. Progress dot later that week. You acquire a throwing knife. It looks great. Balanced. Shiny. You test it behind the bakery. You throw. It hits the wall sideways and bounces off. You try again. It vanishes into a pile of cabbages. You conclude that maybe throwing knives are more for show than usefulness, at least in your hands. Historians still debate how widely such weapons were used. Some argue daggers were the tool of choice favored for their concealability. Others believe short swords or even garrots were common, especially among guild-trained killers. But throwing knives? Likely more fantasy than fact. Too unreliable. Too expensive to lose in cabbage carts. You try to fashion a dart from a quill, thinking it'll be clever. You nearly poke your own eye out. You move on. Your next task is not a kill, but a warning. A message to a scribe suspected of leaking information to a rival guild. Your client wants him scared, not skewered. You like that. Less blood, less guilt. The scribe works in the scriptorium beside the abbey, hunched over scrolls all day, like a dehydrated spider. He eats at the same bench every afternoon, alone, predictable. You wait until dusk, then slip into the scriptorium during vespers, when most monks are at prayers. You sneak past shelves stacked with dusty tomes, past candles dripping onto parchment, and into the side room where the scribe keeps his satchel. You tuck a small note inside. We see what you write. Choose silence. You add a feather for flair. You don't know why dot as you're leaving. You bump into a monk. Are you the candle boy? He asks. You nod. He hands you a wax-soaked rag and mutters, they keep dripping. In the Psalms, you leave without another word. The next day, you watch the scribe open his satchel, read the note, and go pale. He leaves town by sundown. It's a small win, but a clean one. You didn't trip. You didn't fall. You didn't even bleed. You start to think, maybe you're getting good at this. Then comes the noble job. A baron's daughter has been making deals behind her father's back. You're told to send a clear message, not kill, not warn, just scare. You don't ask questions. You nod, accept a bag of coin, and try not to think about how young she might be. You find her easily. Nobles don't blend well. Silks, perfume, attendants. You wait until she slips into a public bathhouse, then sneak in through the back a trick you've sadly practiced. You're nearly at the dressing room when something crashes behind you. A guard, massive, sweaty, unamused. You turn to run. He lunges. You duck. He hits the wall. You scramble forward, leap a bench, and burst through a beaded curtain into a room full of half-dressed nobles. A woman shrieks. A man drops his towel. Someone throws a ladle. You exit through a window, land in a puddle, and tear your tunic climbing over a hedge. You hide in a barrel until dawn. Wondering if you've made a terrible mistake, historians point out that intimidation was a frequent tactic in medieval criminal circles, breaking things, leaving symbols, or even public humiliation. Killing was messy and permanent. But fear? Fear was portable dot back in your alley, bruised and damp. You hear a whisper behind you, Dot, it's Jarek. You dropped this, he says, holding out your dagger. You blink. You were at the bathhouse? You ask Dot, he shrugs. Everyone needs a soak. Just don't drop your blade next time. You nod. You're learning. You're starting to feel like a proper assassin. You've got a blade that actually cuts, a cloak that only smells mildly of vinegar now. And your last job didn't end with livestock or improvised nudity. Progress. But tonight, you've got nowhere to sleep. The baker's haystack is occupied by a snoring drunk and two very territorial cats. You try your luck behind the tannery, but the fumes knock you flat in under 30 seconds. That leaves one option, the forest. You tell yourself it'll be fine, peaceful, even. Stars overhead, leaves rustling gently, no guards or angry butlers chasing you with ladles. You sneak past the last row of cottages, into the tree's ancient, whispering, and not at all welcoming Dot. The moment you're out of sight of the town, the darkness thickens. Lanterns are useless out here, so you walk by moonlight, tripping on roots and flinching at every owl call. You finally find a half-hollowed tree and settle in. Big mistake, because forests, not peaceful. Not at night. Something howls in the distance. Something else snorts. Then there's a sound you can't even describe, somewhere between a hiss, a hiccup, and a medieval plumbing accident. You sit upright, clutching your dagger, convinced death is coming in the form of a surprisingly agile. Dot turns out it's a hedgehog, an angry one. It waddles off, grumbling. You try to sleep anyway. The tree is full of ants. Your back is damp. A branch pokes your ribs. And somewhere overhead, an owl keeps asking existential questions. By dawn, you've slept 12 minutes and discovered 3 new allergies. Historians still argue whether assassins ever lived in the forest. Some say it was common between jobs to avoid bounty hunters and angry nobles. Others say it was suicide. Wolves, outlaws, and starvation don't make for good retirement plans. You emerge groggy, itchy, and unbathed. You head toward a nearby stream, hoping to rinse off the forest's many, many gifts. As you splash water on your face, a shape moves on the other side. A man, cloaked, armed. You freeze. He sees you, then nods slowly before vanishing into the trees. You're not alone out here. Back in town, you ask about forest dwellers. One vendor tells you of the Ash Brotherhood, a loose group of outlaws, spies, and killers who live between. Shadows surfacing only to deliver death or trade rumors for bread. You don't know if they're real or just the product of too many cider-fueled tailies, but the idea sticks in your mind. A few nights later, your client hands you a job that sends you back out there. Targets traveling with a caravan. He says, merchant type, sleeps just outside the city. Take him before the sun's up. Great. A forest hit. You wait until dusk, then slink out to the tree line, watching the flickering torches of the caravan camp. Tents rise like ghostly mushrooms in the twilight. Laughter echoes. A dog barks. You circle quietly, dagger ready, until you spot him, a merchant in a red cap. eating something suspiciously crunchy. You time your approach, moving low, quiet. You get close, so close you can smell his turnip stew. Then the dog spots you. You try to run. The dog is faster. You climb a tree. The dog waits, growling. Eventually, someone hears the noise and investigates. You try to drop silently from the branch butt. Your foot catches and you fall directly into the campfire, screaming steam. Someone throws stew at you. You escape with a bruised elbow and what might be a second-degree burn on your pride. The merchant lives. Again, later, as you limp back to town, you find a pouch tied to a tree branch near the path. Inside, a scrap of jerky and a single coin. A note reads, "Next time don't step on twigs." No signature. You look around. Nothing but wind and trees. You sleep indoors at night, barely sharing space under a broken cart with 3 rats and 1 drunk actor. The actor tells you about his time pretending to be a corpse in a local play. You suspect he's not actually acting, but his story reminds you if people believe what they see, maybe you don't have to be invisible. You just have to look like something no one questions. Next time you go into the forest, you're disguised as a firewood collector. You carry a bundle of sticks, whistle off-key, and wear a cap that covers half your face. It works. You pass guards, peasants, and even 2 bandits who ask if you've seen the guy they're looking for. You tell them he went east. You are he. You go west. Historians sometimes refer to this as the camouflage principle. In medieval towns, assassins didn't hide in shadows, they hid in plain sight, masquerading as beggars, pilgrims, or traveling jesters. They slipped through crowds without a second glance. The key wasn't vanishing. It was being invisible by being ordinary. You return to town with a new mindset. You're not a ghost. You're a candle maker, a fishmonger's assistant, a tired traveler with bad knees and a worse haircut. And next time, you'll walk right past the guards and into the manor. But that's another story. Tonight, you limp home smelling like stew and triumph. You didn't expect your assassin work to bring you to a monastery, but here you are cloaked in borrowed robes, clutching a satchel of fake relics, and pretending to be Brother Cuthbert from the distant abbey of something or other. The monastery. Gate creaks open as you approach. An old nun peers at you suspiciously, eyes narrowed, lips pursed like a disappointed turnip. You bow low, mumble something about divine purpose, and offer her a token, a walnut carved with a cross you found in a market stall. She sniffs it and waves you in. You're in. Your mark is a monk, a scribe, rumored to be copying forbidden texts for a heretical noble. Your instructions are clear. Retrieve the manuscript or silence him, preferably the former. Monasteries don't take kindly to corpses in the courtyard. You walk the cloisters at dusk, pretending to admire the stone arches while scanning for signs of the scribe. Bells toll, candles flicker in alcoves. Somewhere someone is chanting off-key, and the chickens, so many chickens, they roam the courtyard like tiny feathered sentinels. One packs your robe. Another follows you for 20 minutes, staring like it knows what you did last summer. You try to lose it in the herb garden. It follows. Eventually you'll find the scriptorium, a narrow, warm room filled with parchment, ink, and the sound of scribbling. Monks line the benches like wilted turnips, hunched and muttering. You spot him, your target, younger than expected, with a smug expression and a habit of whispering to his inkpot. You watch from a distance, pretending to sweep the floor with a broom you found leaning against a wall. No one questions you, probably because you're sweeping. Nothing. I, or because they're too sleep-deprived to care. That night, you sneak into his chamber. The manuscript is there locked in a small chest. You try to pick the lock with a hairpin. It breaks. You try a chicken bone. It snaps. You try brute force and end up falling over, dragging the chest with you, and knocking over a stand of dried lavender. The noise draws attention. You grab the chest, leap out the window, and land in a compost pile. A chicken lands beside you. It nods solemnly. You flee the monastery before dawn, manuscript in hand, boots squishing with fertilizer. Historians still argue whether monasteries were truly hotbeds of heretical scribes or simply used as scapegoats in political schemes. Either way, records do mention the occasional missing monk or accidental fire. When secrets got too dangerous, you deliver the manuscript to your client. He inspects it, sniffs it for some reason, then hands you a bag of coins and a jar of pickled onions. For your trouble, he says, you don't ask questions. Your next mission comes sooner than expected. Another monastery. Different order. This one built on a hill, surrounded by whispering woods and rumors of buried secrets. Your cover. A novice seeking admission. You're interviewed by a very round abbot who smells like honey and disapproval. He asks you questions about scripture. You mumble something about humility and hope. He nods and assigns you to kitchen duty. Perfect. From the kitchen, you gather gossip. The monks whisper of a hidden scroll locked in the abbot's study, one that could implicate a powerful bishop in a scandal involving land theft, bribes, and an inappropriate number of sheep. Your mission: retrieve the scroll. Quietly, carefully. You spend days learning the abbey's rhythms. When the bells ring, when the kitchen's empty, when Brother Paul snores so loudly he shakes the walls. Finally, at midnight you make your move. You slip through the cloister, wrapped in shadows and potato sack slippers. The abbot's door is locked. You pry it open with a butter knife. Inside, shelves of dusty books, a desk covered in crumbs, and a scroll case nestled among candlesticks. You grab it, then the door creaks. You dive under the desk. Feet shuffle in. The abbot, muttering. He lights a candle, sits, begins to eat what sounds like walnuts. Loudly, you wait. And wait. And wait. An hour passes. He snores. While sitting, you inch out from under the desk. His eyes flutter. You freeze. He burps. You tiptoe backward, heart hammering, scroll in hand. You make it out. Again. The chickens are waiting. You nod at them. They nod back. You don't sleep that night. But the scroll is delivered. The client is pleased. And you're paid in gold this time, not pickles. Vegetables. You spend a few coins on boots that don't squish. You almost feel professional. Until the next morning, when a nun walks past you in town and says, "Nice work with the compost dive, Brother Cuthbert." You freeze. She winks. Historians have long debated the involvement of religious orders in political assassinations. While monks were rarely hired blades, monasteries often served as hiding places, meeting points, and neutral grounds for shady dealings. Cloisters offered both silence and secrets. You leave town the next day, unsure if that nun was joking. You've heard of guilds before stone cutters, weavers, bakers. Even rat catchers have one. So when word reaches you about an assassin's guild operating quietly behind the veil of the spice trade, your curiosity overcomes your better judgment. It starts with a coded invitation, slipped into your boot while you slept behind the cooper's shed. The paper smells like cloves and reeds. Midnight, old spice cellar, knock 5 times. Bring silence. You consider not going. Really, you do. But the idea of belonging somewhere, of having co-workers, maybe even a pension plan feels impossible to ignore. You find the cellar entrance in a crumbling brick building that used to sell cinnamon before the mold took over. It's hidden behind a barrel labeled "Nothing Suspicious," definitely not spices. Subtle. You knock 5 times. A slit opens. 2 eyes glare at you. What do you want? You hesitate. To bring silence? The door opens. Inside, it's dim, damp, and smells like nutmeg and secrets. A dozen figures sit around a cracked stone table. They wear mismatched cloaks, hoods at various angles, and expressions ranging from haunted to chronically unimpressed. Welcome to the Assassin's Guild. You're handed a candle and told to earn your flame. You don't ask what that means. Instead, you sit, listen. Wait. The meeting is chaos. One man complains someone borrowed his best garrote and never returned it. A woman insists someone keeps eating her preserved pears. Someone else is trying to form a subcommittee on dagger maintenance. You suspect at least 2 members are drunk, and the leader, a wiry older man with a patch over one eye, who keeps quoting cryptic lines from plays no one remembers. You raise your hand to ask about jobs. Everyone groans. You learn quickly that the guild is not the fearsome, elite organization whispered about in back alleys. It's more like a squabbling book club with a murder hobby. They assign you to dagger cleaning duty. You clean 12 knives, 1 spoon, and, disturbingly, what looks like a fish hook carved with runes. When you ask what it's for, someone just says, "You don't want to know." You don't. Still, you try to make yourself useful. You organize supplies, polish boots, help someone retrieve a stuck throwing star from the ceiling. You're Cherney. You're the intern. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins ever formed formal guilds. Some records hint at underground networks, mercenaries, for hire, often operating under the guise of legitimate trades. But whether they had meetings, handbooks, or snack rotations remains unknown. Most likely, these groups were loose affiliations rather than structured organizations. But you learn things here, important things, like how to blend certain herbs to create a sleeping draught, how to twist a blade to silence faster, how to fake a coughing fit to distract a guard, thanks to Marla and her cough like a noble with lung rot routine. You even find a mentor of sorts, a broad-shouldered woman named Drix, who communicates mostly in shrugs and the occasional grunt. She teaches you how to walk across floorboards without making a sound, how to look like you belong in any room, how to leave behind a signature of personal mark. Yours becomes a circle crossed with 2 lines. Simple, subtle. You carve it into the bottom of a chair after your first solo job under the guild's name. That job? A disgraced knight turned tavern rat. hiding in plain sight, running his mouth too much about which noble paid him to disappear. A rival. You slip into his room above the alehouse just before dawn. He's snoring. His boots are still on. His sword lies inches from his hand. You hesitate. Then you don't dot it's clean. Quiet. Quick, you leave before the sun rises, tossing a single coin to the sleeping innkeeper on your way out. You feel different. Not proud exactly, but capable. Controlled. Efficient. The guild welcomes you back with tepid applause, a half-eaten apple, and a note that says, "Dagger cleaning is still your job. Good work." Still, you've never felt more like you belonged. You even start making friends, sort of. There's Noli, who collects teeth from each job and stores them in alphabetized pouches. And Gatto, who writes poems before every kill and insists on reciting them afterward. You once heard him rhyme silence with violence and compliance. It didn't work, but he meant well. There's drama too. Two members fight over territory. Another accuses someone of stealing her grappling hook. Someone else insists they saw a ghost in the cellar. You stop asking questions. One evening, during a routine meeting, the leader stands and makes an announcement. There is a traitor in our ranks. Everyone gasps. You drop your spoon. He says nothing more, just stares, then sits. Tension grips the cellar. Paranoia blooms. You eye the others. They eye you. Things change. Suddenly no one shares job leads. Knives go missing. You find your bedroll damp and suspiciously scented like onions. You don't sleep well for a week. Then Drix pulls you aside. "Lay low," she says. "Don't take anything big. Watch your back." You nod. Historians note that while some criminal groups did have codes of honor, they also crumbled quickly under stress. Loyalty was fragile. Trust was transactional. One mistake, and your closest ally might be the one slipping poison into your broth. You start watching everyone. You start walking differently. And one night, you find a note under your gear. They think it's you. Leave. Now. No signature. You're gone by MOONRICE. No goodbyes. No packed bag. Just silence. And the feeling that guild or no guild, you're back on your own. You spend the next few weeks drifting, moving from village to village. No jobs, no guild, no one breathing behind you in candlelit cellars. You miss the damp smell of the spice vault. You even miss Gatto's poetry, but mostly you miss knowing where your next coin is coming from. That changes when a courier finds you one evening in a roadside tavern, sipping thin broth and pretending it's soup. He hands you a wax-sealed scroll and vanishes. Before you can ask who sent him, the scroll is brief. The baker's son in Hollowmere. He saw too much. You know what must be done. Payment upon proof. There's no signature, no wax emblem. Just orders. You crumple the parchment, suddenly cold. The baker's son? You've never been to Hollowmere. You don't even know where it is. And there's no name, no description, just the sun. Someone expects you to eliminate a child. You travel anyway, out of curiosity or desperation. Hollowmere is small, quiet. A few thatched cottages, and one tiny bakery with a crooked chimney that puffs flour instead of smoke. You watch from a hilltop. Hidden beneath a thorny hedge. The baker's son is maybe 14, maybe 15, thin, tired-eyed. He limps slightly, favoring his left leg. You see him help his father with sacks of grain, then kneel to feed crusts to a one-eyed cat. You wait for malice, for signs of corruption or danger. There's none. You realize this is a mistake, or worse, a test. You return to the tavern that night, weighed down with guilt and indecision. You've taken lives before, but this feels different. You spend the night staring at the rafters, haunted by questions. Is someone watching? Would they know if you walked away? The next morning, you leave Hollowmere. You carve a fake sign of death into the baker's fence, just a charcoal X and a handful of ashes, and then vanish down a muddy trail, hoping whoever hired you buys the lie. You're halfway to the next village when the rains begin, and then, just to twist the knife, you learn that the job was a trap, a setup. Later that week, a merchant offers you bread in exchange for a bit of conversation. You accept. Midway through your second bite, he leans in and whispers, "They know you didn't do it." Your throat freezes mid-swallow. "They wanted to see if you'd follow orders blindly," he says, smiling like someone reading your eulogy. You failed the test. You passed the test. It depends on who you ask. You don't finish your bread. You leave town that night, eyes always scanning the road behind. Historians still debate the morality of medieval assassination work. Was it political necessity? Brutal survival? Cold commerce? Some contracts were tests of loyalty. Others were just lies. A few were stories invented by rivals to remove threats without ever drawing a blade. You walk for days, eat little, sleep less. When you finally take another job, it's straightforward. Eliminate a corrupt tax assessor in a Hilfort 2 valleys over. You agree. Glad for the clarity. You climb the slope at dusk, slipping through briars and mist. The fort's watchtower is dark, unmanned, the front gates half rotted. You're inside before anyone notices. The assessor sleeps near the hearth, swaddled in pelts, the smell of roasted mutton clinging to everything. You move like shadow. You draw your blade, and then you hear it, footsteps. You duck behind a curtain just as someone enters hooded, silent, knife already drawn. You watch as they approach the assessor, blade poised, but the assessor is ready. He lunges. The two struggle. You realize you're watching another assassin do your job, and fail at it. You make a decision. You intervene. A swift move, blade to the side, distraction, a shove. The hooded assassin falls, not dead, just dazed. You drag them outside, drop them beneath a tree, and vanish before dawn. The next day, the job is done, but not by you. The local gossip says the taxman died in his sleep. Peaceful, clean. You never hear from the client, but a week later, someone slips a note under your cup while you doze at an inn. That was the right call. For now, no name. Again, you wonder if there's a ledger somewhere with your name written in shaky ink next to a column marked unreliable or useful. You try not to think about it, but later, as you wash your hands in the river, you find a small, smooth stone in your pocket, carved with your symbol. The circle and 2 lines dot. It wasn't there before. Historians love to say that medieval spies and killers left behind tokens to mark their passage coins, feathers, knots. Maybe it's true, or maybe it's another story we tell to give meaning to movements in the dark. You stare at the stone heart, THUDDING dot. Is this a warning? A compliment? A threat? You don't know, but you keep it dot just in case. You're nearly asleep in the loft of a barn, warm hay, full belly, relatively rat-free. When the trap springs dot, it starts with footsteps. Not the slow shuffle of a farmer, not the cautious tread of someone hoping not to wake the chickens. No, these steps are calculated, soft, familiar dot. You sit up dot too late. The door crashes open. Two figures enter, cloaked, armed. No time to grab your knife, no time to run. You lunge toward the rafters, half climbing, half flailing, but a heavy boot catches your ribs and slams you down. Sack over the head, rope at the wrists. You're dragged outside, into the night dot. The next time you open your eyes, it's candlelight dot, dim, flickering. Smells of wax and mold and onions. Your wrists are bound to a chair. You blink through sweat. A shape leans over you, a face partially hidden by a mask. You've been asking too many questions, the masked figure says softly. You haven't spoken to anyone in a week, but now isn't the time to argue dot. They continue. Your last job. The taxman. You weren't. The only one hired. That part you already knew, but you interfered, the voice goes on. And that's not your role. You try to play dumb. The masked figure chuckles. Oh, don't bother. We know who you are. You're the one from the cellar. The intern with the fish hook and the vinegar cloak. Rude, but fair. What follows is a lecture, a threat, a warning. It's hard to tell. The words blur together. You're hungry. Your head aches. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, probably mocking you. Then things get dot, dot, creative. They bring out a kettle, not a blade. Not a branding iron, a kettle, brass, wide-bottomed. You watch as they place it on a low flame and fill it with water, muttering about tradition. You try to speak. Your voice is hoarse. What is this? You croak. Test number 2, says a second figure. You failed the first. The kettle begins to bubble. A third figure enters, short, round, sniffling in places. A rat on the table. Your heart stops. You've heard of this. The kettle test. They strap the rat to your bare stomach, place the kettle over it, open end down, and begin to heat the top dot. The theory? The rat, desperate to escape the growing heat, will try to burrow its way through you. You panic. You thrash. The ropes hold dot, then the kettle is removed. The rat is calm. The flame is snuffed. See? Says the masked figure. We didn't hurt you. You don't believe them, but we could have, they add, tapping the kettle for effect. They untie you. We're watching, they say. There are no lone assassins. Not anymore. They leave. Just like that dot, you sit in the dark, breathing, hard, head on your belly, where the rat sat like some furry angel of death. Historians still debate the use of psychological torture in medieval Europe. Was the rat in kettle real, or one of those tailies that grew in taverns and execution yards until truth and horror became indistinguishable? Scholars can't agree, dot. You can dot. It's very real dot. You spend the next week hiding under a bridge. You eat moldy bread, drink river water, and flinch every time a rat scampers by. You feel like your bones have opinions now, and most of them are angry. Eventually, you crawl back to civilization. You patch your clothes, sharpen your knife, Re-dye your cloak with crushed berries and charcoal, because apparently you have a signature scent now. You get a job, small, clean. Jealous spice trader wants his rival's books stolen. No blood, just paperwork. You break in at night, unlock the ledgers, and slip out without waking the dog. You don't trip, you don't fall, you don't even sneeze. You get paid. In coin that no poison, no betrayals, no boiling rodents that it feels weird. But the real moment of dread comes 2 days later. You receive a note. No courier. Just ... finds you. In your boot again. It reads, "You did well, but we'll be checking." There's a portrait next to it. You consider retirement. But retirement in your line of work often means one of 2 things: getting hired as someone else's final job, disappearing into the woods, and talking to rocks until you think one of them blinks. Neither is appealing. You try to find Drix. She's gone. You ask about Gaddo. Dead, maybe. Or a poet now. Hard to tell the difference. You check the old spice cellar. Burned out. Collapsed. Someone put flowers at the door. You walk away. Slower this time. You realize something important. You're not an assassin anymore. You're a survivor. There's a difference. You've barely finished chewing your breakfast half a turnip raw because you live in luxury when a knock rattles the stable door. Not the angry night kind of knock. Not the "we've found you" murder knock. No, this one is polite. You open the door. A boy stands there, skinny, nervous, holding out a folded note with both hands like it might explode. You open it. Inside it reads, "Simple job. Housekeeper at the Castellan's Manor. Left door unlocked. Make it look accidental. No name, just a wax seal, a boar's head and crossed needles." You sigh. The Castellan's Manor is 3 towns over. You know the root-steep hills, broken roads, and a swamp that smells like pickled ghosts. But a job's a job, and you need to work. You set off before noon, grumbling with each muddy step. 2 days later you arrive dirty, tired, with a boot, sole flapping like a gossiping fish. The manor is big. Gilded windows, guards who yawn more than they patrol. You loiter near the servants' entrance pretending to be lost until a bored cook tosses you a crust and tells you to get in before the stew boils over. You're inside. Now comes the tricky part. You need to find the housekeeper, confirm her identity, and make her death look like an accident. A slip on stairs, perhaps. A fall near the fire. You hate these jobs. You find her near the laundry yard, scolding a young boy for tracking in mud. She's older, sharp-eyed, and not exactly beloved based on how the other staff avoid her like a contagious sermon. You follow from a distance. Observe. She walks with purpose. Keys jingling at her side. Always alone. You begin your plan. There's a loose stair plank near the upper level. You wedge a little soap fat beneath it, slicking the edge. You wait. Evening comes. She heads upstairs, arms full of linen. She steps. Slips. Tumbles. It works. Almost. She survives. Barely. Broken wrist. Cracked ribs. Still conscious. She moans. The other servants rush to her. You panic. You run. Out the back, through the orchard, into the night, and right into a guard. You both yell. He stumbles. You stumble. You knock over a barrel of apples and land flat on your back with a thump that echoes. Like Doom Dot, he raises his halberd, demanding answers. You fake a stutter, pretend you're drunk, cry a little. He squints, sighs, then escorts you out by the ear and dumps you in the dirt outside the gates. You're lucky I hate paperwork, he mutters. You limp away. Another job botched. Back at the village, you hide in the attic of a cider house and wait. Wait for the punishment. It comes. 3 days later, a stranger walks in while you're peeling potatoes for a tavern job. He says nothing, just pulls out a chair, stares at you, and coughs. Loudly. You freeze. He drops something on the table. A bag of coins, a piece of ginger root, and a small note. We told you. Proof. It's signed with 2 crossed needles. You hand over a fake letter you forged earlier, one that makes it look like the housekeeper left town. Disgraced. You don't even know if it'll work. You just hope whoever's checking won't dig deep. Man eyes you, then walks away. You exhale so hard your candle flickers. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins took accident contracts. Some suggest they were common, making deaths look like misfortune, reduced attention from local lords and priests. Others believe such methods were rare, too risky, too unreliable. No one agrees on how often assassins failed. You're a walking argument. That night, back in your shared room above the stables, your stomach churns. Probably the turnip, possibly the anxiety. You dream of stairs, of eyes in the dark, of a woman screaming your name, though you've never told her what it is. You wake with a start, candles still burning, moon slicing through the shutters like a judge. You need to stop. You need something simpler. You try to disappear again, this time as a cheese merchant's helper. You learn more than you ever wanted to know about rennet and mold. You also discover that the cheese cart doubles as a smuggling operation. Not gold, not spices, letters, secret ones, and half of them addressed to people you've worked for. One evening, while stacking wheels of soft cheese in a cellar, you hear footsteps overhead, then voices, familiar names, the words loose end. You don't wait. You escape through the rear trapdoor into a barrel of rainwater. From there into the alley you run, cheese stuck in your boot, rats watching like theater critics. Later, soaked and reeking of goat's milk, you collapse in a tool shed and mutter to the dark, I really hate stairs. Historians rarely note just how often the worst part of an assassin's job is unpredictability. One day you're slipping into a fortress. The next you're pretending to be dead just to avoid an awkward conversation. You stare at the ceiling. A mouse blinks at you. You blink back. Neither of you moves. You should have known better than to seek shelter in a church. But you're tired, cold, desperate, and somewhere, someone is still probably carrying around a list with your name on it, along with a sketch that looks nothing like you, but somehow still manages to capture your bad posture and haunted eyes. So when the chapel bell rings through the misty dusk, you follow the sound. It's a small stone church, perched on a hill like an old secret. Inside, candles flicker. Incense curls lazily through the arches. A single monk, robed and silent, sweeps the floor. You don't speak. You just sit in the back pew, pretending to pray. Mostly just breathing. The monk doesn't ask questions. He brings you a bowl of broth and a hunk of bread. No strings. No threats. You consider staying. For a while, you do stay. You help with firewood, sweep floors, patch leaking roof tiles with stolen wax. It feels nice. Foreign. Until someone recognizes you. It's the bishop's courier passing through on his way to a nearby priory. You lock eyes in the courtyard. He squints, tilts his head. Do I know you? You shake your head. He stares, then shrugs. That night you pack your things. All 2 of them. You thank the monk. He places a hand on your shoulder. I won't ask why you're leaving, he says, but I hope you find a place where you don't have to. You nod. Try to remember how to feel things. It's not easy anymore. You leave before the sun's up. Historians love to point out how powerful the church was in the medieval world. Kings feared excommunication more than swords. But for all its might, the church rarely welcomed assassins. Not openly. Not unless you were killing someone in the name of God. And even then, it was more about politics than prayer. You try to lay low. Again, you wander east, taking odd jobs that don't require knives or aliases. In one village, you herd sheep. Badly. In another, you paint fences for a man who insists on singing psalms off-key. The entire time, you pretend you don't notice the missing persons posters nailed to trees, some of which vaguely resemble you if you squint and imagine a worse haircut. Eventually, the money runs out. So when a noble woman in silk boots and a hooded veil finds you sitting outside an inn, sharpening a stick with a butter knife, and asks, "Are you still in the business?" You don't say no. She leads you to her carriage, offers wine, tells you her husband is plotting something. Letters, she whispers, lies, schemes. She wants you to find out who he's working with. Not kill him. Just observe. Report back. Simple. You take the job. You follow her husband. For days. You trail him through market stalls and side streets. You listen to him argue with merchants, flirt with barmaids, and once wrestle a goose. Eventually, you follow him to a crumbling villa on the outskirts of town. He enters, you wait and wait. You hear voices. You sneak in through a side gate. The windows are cracked. Inside, candlelight flickers. You crouch beneath the sill, listening. Then you freeze. You know that voice. It's not the nobleman's. It's yours. Or rather, someone pretending to be you. They describe your last job. Fake death. The cellar incident. Even the monastery rat test. Your stomach knots. Inside. They're selling you out. Trading information for coin. They know your habits. Your roots. The way you favor your left knee when it rains. You leave. Fast. Quiet. You deliver no report to the noblewoman, but you do leave her a note slipped under the cushion of her coach. Your husband's meeting with a liar. He sounds a lot like me. That should worry you. No signature. Just your old mark, a circle with 2 lines. The next day, you hear whispers that the nobleman left town suddenly. Disgraced. Fled in the night. You almost feel bad. That evening, you try the church. Again. Not to hide. Just to listen. You sit in the pew, watch the monk light candles. You think about the life you might have had, but then you hear someone say your name, quietly, near the door. Not your real name. The one people whisper. The one that follows you like a shadow. You stand. Leave through the back. You're not safe here anymore. Historians often speculate how many assassins truly sought redemption if they could. If they wanted to, the answer is murky. In most records they vanish, off the page. No legacy, no graves, just gone. You sleep that night in a hay cart. Again, you dream of the monk, the goose, the sound of your voice being used by someone else. You wake to a chicken pecking your boot. It feels like a sign. You tell yourself this is your last job. You've said that before, of course. Every time, really. But this time, you mean it. Maybe, sort of. The job comes from a toothless old man in a green hat who pays you in advance with a pouch of silver, a bottle of plum wine, and a quiet apology. That last part's new. His words are soft. He hurt someone close to me, he says. Just make sure he never does again. You nod. You don't ask questions. You never do anymore. Your target is a miller. Lives by a river. Broad shoulders. Greasy smile. Known for settling debts with fists. You watch him for 3 days. Day 1. He argues with his apprentice. Throws a barrel into the river. Then sings to his cat like nothing happened. Day 2. He cheats a farmer out of a cartload of grain and flirts with the barmaid, who clearly wants him to get lost. Day 3. He tosses a boot at a child for standing too close to his door. You stop wondering why the man in the green hat wanted this done. You start wondering why no one else has already taken care of it. The river runs fast behind the mill. The current's strong. If someone slipped, no one would ask too many questions. You plan the scene. You wait until dusk, when the miller goes outside to relieve himself in a bucket. He keeps behind the shed. You move, silent. Focused. You slip behind him. You raise your knife. He turns and says your name, not the name you give in inns. Not the name sprawled on wanted posters. Your real name, the one you haven't heard in years. The one you buried the day you picked up a blade and started running. Everything stops. He grins. I remember you, he says. You were smaller back then. Your hand trembles. He knows you. Not just vaguely. Personally. From before childhood. A town, a shared past blurred by time and trauma. You don't remember, he does. I taught you how to gut fish, he adds, laughing. Didn't think you'd end up gutting people. You step back. He raises his arms. Come on then. Do it. Everyone wants me dead. Might as well be you. You hesitate. Longer than you should. He uses it. Throws a fist. You duck. He grabs your cloak. You twist. The knife flashes. He stumbles. Falls into the river. You don't see him hit the water. You just hear the splash, the churn, the silence after. You sit by the bank for an hour. You don't know if he lived. You don't check. Historians still argue about revenge in the assassin's trade. Some say all killers were running from something. Others say they were simply drawn by coin. But just a few killed for memory, for ghosts. You walk back to town under the weight of that name. Your name. You say it out loud. Once. It feels like trying on an old coat. Too tight. Still smells like fire. The next day you return the pouch of silver. You keep the wine. The old man doesn't ask questions. He just nods. I figured you might, he says. You spend the night on a rooftop, staring at the stars through chimney smoke. You think about the man in the river, about who he might have been, about who you were, and then for the first time in a long while, you laugh, not because anything is funny, but because you realize this life you never chose it. You were pulled into it like a leaf into a drain, a coin flipped on a crooked table. You're not a ghost. You're not a legend. You're not even a particularly efficient assassin. You're just someone who kept surviving long enough to become dangerous. You climb down from the roof and walk until your feet hurt, in the next village. You introduce yourself as a tanner. You help dye leather, mend torn belts, listen to a woman complain about her goat who eats laundry. You stay for a week, no knives, no notes, no secrets, but you know it won't last because it never does. One morning, you wake to find a scrap of parchment tucked in your boot. Again, you unfold it, no words, just your old mark etched in charcoal, the circle. 2 lines someone remembers. You leave before sunrise. No note, no goodbye. Just a cold fire pit and your shadow trailing behind like an unpaid debt. The mark in your boot means someone still wants your attention, or your head, possibly both. You're not sure anymore which is worse. You travel north, hoping the wind will shake off the scent of your past. Villages blur, fields pass. The names of roads no longer matter. You sleep in barns, under carts, in trees once until a squirrel bit you on the thumb. You don't tell anyone that part. A week later, in a quiet hamlet with more sheep than people, you find yourself leaning on a post outside a cider shed. You're trying to look like you belong, like someone boring. A boy approaches, not a courier, not an assassin, just a boy. He holds out a folded piece of paper, mouth trembling. She said you'd be here, he mutters, then runs off without another word. You watch him vanish into the trees. You open the note. It's short. You owe me. You'll know the target when you see him. Beneath that, your own mark again, but not drawn by your hand. It's cleaner, sharper. Someone's copying you. Someone's impersonating you. You laugh, bitter and dry. Of course they are. You vanish, and the myth begins. Somewhere out there, someone is killing in your name. Could leave it. You should. But you don't. You follow the rumors that a nobleman found poisoned in the West. A merchant vanished mid-market. A bailiff accidentally falling into a millstone. Each time your mark is left behind. Or a version of it. Not quite right. Not yours, but close enough to raise questions. You follow the trail to a city bigger than the ones you're used to. Stone walls, guard towers, merchants with embroidered hats and guards who walk like they get paid on time. You sneak in through a drainage canal. You're covered in things you don't name. But you're inside. You find the inn where the latest rumor started. A man claiming to be you. Silent, clean, efficient. Leaves a calling card. You wait. And then he walks in. Tall, calm, wearing a version of your old cloak patched differently, but still cut the same. He moves like you wish you moved. He sits like a shadow folding into the room. You watch from a corner. Invisible for once. He meets a man in merchant silks. They whisper. They exchange coins. You follow. He slips into a back alley, pauses, then says, without turning, you're not very quiet. Your blade is out before you think. So is his. You circle each other. I didn't give you permission to use my mark, you say. He smirks. You left it behind. Then he lunges. You fight. Brief, brutal, he's good. Better than you, maybe. But he's cocky. You're not. Not anymore. You win. He lies bleeding in the alley, coughing, blade still clenched in his fist. You will just be replaced, he says. By who? Anyone. Doesn't matter. You're a ghost. Ghosts don't. Retire. You stand over him. You think of all the people who've died because someone thought you had done it, and then you do something strange. You help Ham. You drag him to a healer's hut on the edge of the city. You drop a pouch of coin on the table and walk out without a word. Let him live. Let him remember you as the assassin who didn't finish the job. Let the myth end. Historians never agree on how real assassins ended their careers. Some vanished. Some were hanged. Some lived as monks or mercenaries. Some became legends, distorted until their names meant fear or nothing at all. You walk out of the city and toss your last blade into a stream. You don't stop walking. You reach a quiet place, a cabin, maybe, a hut, a cave, somewhere no one remembers. Your face, somewhere you can be known. You grow a beard. You catch fish. You mend your own boots. You don't kill anyone, not anymore. You sleep. You dream of chickens and goats and a man with a brass kettle. But mostly you rest. The world forgets you. You let it. And now, as the candle flickers lower and the final echoes of that winding, shadowy journey begin to fade, you let your breath slow. Let your eyes soften. Let the old, moss-covered stones of the past sink back into stillness. You made it through muddy boots, crooked paths, a life always teetering between the blade and the silence after. 1,000 steps, 100 names. But tonight, there's no one chasing you, no letters under your door, no masked figures in alleyways. Just the hush of leaves, the hush of memory, and the hush of a story that for once has nothing left to take from you. Let the world outside fade. Let the cloak fall. Let the daggers rust. You are safe now. And whether your journey began in a cellar beneath a spice shop or ended on a hill where the wind speaks only to the trees, it doesn't matter. Not anymore, because here in the soft dark with the quiet hum of sleep drawing near, there are no names, no debts, no ghosts, only rest. So close your eyes. Let go of the road. Let go of the blade, and let the quiet take you, gently, all the way down. Good night.